Hey guys, how's it going? It's Ben from Chegg Tutors here, and today we're going to cover the psychology topic of conformity. So in this video, we're going to start off by defining conformity, and then we're going to look at a few factors that influence conformity, and then we're going to analyze a case study that was done on conformity. So, conformity is defined as the disposition for humans to behave like other humans do, especially in the context of a specific social group, such as one's peers. So, conformity is important to psychology because psychologists study conformity to explain human behavior in social contexts. In other words, they want to find out why people conform, because multiple studies have been conducted over the years analyzing this conformity, and they all seem to point at the fact that people don't conform because they're explicitly pressured to. They conform to others' behaviors and standards because of certain factors or certain things in the environment. And that's what we'll talk about in this video, what pressures that people feel that they're under to make them conform to others. So let's take a look at these two general influences for conformity first. So there are two general categories of influences for conformity. The first is normative influence. Normative influence. So normative influence is what's known as the want to fit in. So in this case, someone conforms to others' opinions because they want to not seem like they're out of place in the group. Usually in this case, it means that the person doesn't necessarily agree with the opinion that they're conforming to, but rather that they want to conform just to fit in with the group. So an example of this would be, let's say that you're in class and the teacher asks a multiple choice question, or true or false. So true or false, and immediately you think that the answer is true, obviously true, but then everyone else starts saying it's false. And then eventually the teacher asks everyone one by one to give their answers, everyone's saying false, and then she gets to you, and what are you going to say? Well, even though you think it's true, you're probably going to say false, because you want to fit in. You don't want everyone else to think that you're an idiot. And the key thing to note here is that you don't actually think the answer is false, but you say it because you don't want to seem different. And that's what normative influence is in a situation. The second major factor of conformity is informational influence. So in informational influence, someone conforms to the majority opinion because they genuinely think that the group is better informed than themselves. So in this case, you're conforming because you think that the group is actually right over you. And an example in which there might be informational influence is, let's say that you're visiting a city. Let's say you're visiting Los Angeles and you've never been there. But before you visit, you look up a map of where you're going and the streets and etc. And then when you actually get there, you ask a bunch of people on the street where a certain location you're looking for is. And you have a general idea in your head from the maps you looked at, but everyone you ask points you in the opposite direction. In this case, you would probably conform to their opinion and take their advice because you figure that they are residents of the city and that they know better than you do because they lived there for their lives. And this is an example of informational influence because you automatically assume that the majority group that has a different opinion than you is better informed because in this case they've been there longer. So these are two general categories of influences on conformity that have been discovered over the years. And to wrap up this discussion on conformity, let's look at a case study, a very famous case study that was conducted in 1951 by Solomon Asch. So this is known as the Solomon Asch conformity experiment, or sometimes known colloquially as the line experiment. So what Solomon Asch did is he devised this experiment in which on the left he gave a line, a single line, and on the right he gave 3 other lines, labeled them A, B, and C, one of them of which matches up to the length of the line on the left, exhibit 1, and then he asked the people who came in to identify which one on the right, A, B, or C, was closest to the one on the left. So which line matches the length of the line on the left. So a pretty easy task. So for the control of this experiment, we had the participant just answer it by themselves in a room. It was just them and the person asking the question, and virtually no one made an error. They all gave the right answers. So in this case, the right answer is A. It's pretty easy to see. And for the actual experiment, he had 50 male students from a certain college, and there were 18 trials, and in all 18 trials, in the actual trials, he had confederates. He had people who were in on the study, but to the actual participant, it seems like they're just other participants, and there's just a room of 19 total participants. But in reality, that participant was the only actual participant, and the other people in the room were confederates. And so in these 18 trials, in 12 of the trials, the confederates were given instructions to give an incorrect answer. So even though the task looks so obvious, like who can miss this, the confederates were instructed to answer incorrectly, and they're all instructed to answer the same incorrect answer. So for example, in this problem, they might have instructions to all answer C. And how the experiment was arranged was that each person had to say their answer out loud in front of everyone else, and the actual participant was always last to give his answer. So this situation is similar to the normative influence that we just covered. Imagine you're in this situation, and you obviously think in this problem that it's A, but everyone else answers C, like every single person before you answer C, and it gets to you. You're definitely going to feel some pressure that you're going to be out of place in the room if you answer A, even though it seems so obvious to you. So due to this effect, in those 12 trials in which the confederates gave incorrect answers, about, on average, a third of the participants went along and conformed with the incorrect answer, even though it's obvious that it was incorrect. So that's on average, and over those 12 trials, about 3/4 of the participants conformed at least once. So at least once out of those 12 trials, 3/4 of the participants, 75%, conformed. And the remaining 25%, or 1/4 of the participants, never conformed, not even once. So yeah, based on this data, it's pretty obvious that the effects of conformity are very real. And this is compared to the control group, which once again was just the single participant giving his answer out loud, in which less than 1% of the participants ever gave the wrong answer. So this shows that this drastic increase in the incorrect answer was indeed caused by the pressure to conform. So after this famous experiment in 1951, Solomon Asch went on to analyze or change up his experiment to see what specific factors affected conformity. And there were a few important ones that we'll go over briefly. The first is group size. He found that although you would think that the larger the majority is, so the more people there are disagreeing with you, the more you'd be pressured to conform. This is only true up to a certain extent. This is because once the majority got up to a size of like 4 or 5 other people, the participant might suspect some collusion going on. So at that point, if there are so many people in the room, other people in the room that are disagreeing with him, he might start to think, oh, maybe I'm the only real participant in this experiment, which he was in this case. So keeping it smaller than that threshold number kept the conformity levels high because the participants did not suspect anything. Another factor affecting the conformity in the experiment was the lack of group unanimity, or also known as the presence of an ally. So when everyone else disagrees, but there is also another dissenter. So so in this case, all the Confederates are instructed to give the incorrect answer, except for one Confederate who is instructed to agree with the participant and give the obvious correct answer. So he's a dissenter. So with one dissenter already disagreeing with the majority, the participant, who is the last one to answer in the group, is more likely to also give a dissenting answer and answer correctly. So this presence of an ally, just one ally, reduces conformity as much as 80% in the trials. So it's pretty huge to have this one dissenter from the majority that encourages further dissension. Another factor that influenced the conformity was the difficulty of the task. So as you can see in this diagram we have here, the task is relatively easy because the lines are so obvious. It's so obvious like which one matches up with Exhibit 1. But when Solomon Asch made the task a little harder by making these lines on the right a lot closer to each other in length so that it's more difficult to tell which one exactly matches up with the one on the left, the conformity increased. And this is because of this informational bias that we talked about before. This time, maybe the participant genuinely doesn't know which one is closest in length, and he figures that the majority, which is all answering this one specific answer, knows something that he doesn't, and therefore he should conform to this information. So the harder the task was, the more conformity there was, because the participant became less sure of him or herself. And another factor that affected the conformity was the status of the majority group. So if the majority group was made out to be a higher status, for example, teachers, professors, etc., then conformity levels increased in the participants because of, once again, of this kind of informational bias. The participant is led on to believe that there's no way that these people of high status could be wrong with such an easy problem, so that he himself must be wrong. And finally, the factor of answering in private affected the conformity. So in the original experiment that we discussed, the participant and all the other Confederates must answer one by one out loud in the group what he or she thinks the correct answer is. But Solomon Asch gave an altered version in which the participant answered and all the other Confederates answered or the participant was allowed to answer in private, but the Confederates still answered out loud. So the participant still knew that the majority said the wrong answer, but this time, since he's allowed to answer in private on paper and turn in his answer, he doesn't have to feel pressured into conforming, because he won't be publicly shamed and he won't feel different from the group because he's not giving his opinion out verbally, he's writing it down on paper. So when the participant was allowed to answer in private, conformity decreased drastically because of this factor of being allowed to bypass this shaming. So it decreased a lot of the normative influence that the majority group had on the participant due to this private answering. So those are the basics of the Solomon Asch case study on conformity, and those are also the general ideas surrounding this idea of conformity in psychology. I hope you guys now have a better grasp on what exactly conformity is and how and why it's important to the field of psychology.